And welcome to another episode of Patriots 4th and 2. I am your host, as always, Derek Havens, and joining me is Mr. Steve Belsherry. We are both PatsFans.com bloggers. Today's episode, we are kind of doing it on the fly. Steve called an audible. The Patriots did play their Week 18 game, but forget the score. We're going to talk about the draft position, but we decided to do the show late Sunday night. It is 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time on January 5th. Happy New Year's to you guys, by the way, and thank you for joining us. But Steve, an hour after the game, the Patriots announced Jerod Mayo has been fired as the head coach, and it's a topic that we certainly have had kind of been widely debated, whether it's been on public forums between fans, daily conversations with friends or family. It's been talked about on, network news, radio stations. It's been really up in the air. I thought there was zero chance 6 weeks ago. And it felt like over the last couple of weeks, things have kind of slowly built. We talked about it on our last show. You said it was 50-50, but you leaned, he would stay. I thought it was about a 30% chance. I also thought he would stay, but they decided to let him go. And there's a lot of different layers to this onion, Steve. So I don't want to dilute it too much, but just give me your first reaction to when you found out he was relieved of his duties.
I was just surprised, not so much by them letting him go, but how quickly they went about this. Obviously, this had been in the works before today, because Kraft's statement was already written. So I think, this was probably going to be done very quickly.
Which is another layer to the story, but go ahead.
Yeah, and I think today probably put the final nail in the coffin that they weren't going to wait any time at all, because they had one job today, and that was to do what they've been doing all year, and that's lose. And and you have to give credit to the Buffalo Bills, because they were intent that they were not going to win this football game today.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I don't fault the Patriots players whatsoever. You look, I mean, Buffalo rested, almost all their starters. And
I was surprised with how much James Cook played today. I thought that was weird. I would have thought he would have gotten the early treatment too. I didn't mean to step on your toes. I just wanted to point that out.
The Patriots played a lot of, a lot of their backups as well. And those guys, they're putting an audition tape out because they don't know what's going to happen next year. So I don't fault them at all for going out and playing hard.
Absolutely.
And I was
Steve. Tanking does not come from the coaching and player level. We know this. It's a I have a group chat with my cousins.
I think the Bills were tanking today.
Oh, well, yeah, because they could have had a pep talk, in the locker room before and been like, hey guys, just so you know, if we do, if we were to lose, this would actually really be beneficial. But at the same time, like you said, the players are putting out audition tapes, the coaches are putting out audition tapes. I mean, it's really hard to go. You can be annoyed that the Patriots won, and I certainly would be in that category. I mean, look, do I think that they could still get a very good player at number 4 overall in the draft? Yes, and we'll talk about the draft later. This is not a draft show right now. But it did probably cost you some potential assets you could gain by dropping a couple of spots.
Absolutely.
And that to me is the biggest loss of the day is if you want to say that you want to draft one of the tackles, a receiver, a cornerback, an edge rusher, whoever it is, at 4, and I'll say, yeah, I mean, the quality player to me between 1 and 10, I don't think is that dissimilar, but it will be that will be again another show. But to me, if you have the first pick, you control it all, Steve, and then they come to you. You're the one. They're not. You're having your shoes up on the desk, and they're knocking at your door, and they want to make a deal with you instead of you having to kind of feel the waters out. They're still in good position, but that was one of the biggest losses.
Great position at number 4. However, I mean, like you said, there's only like last year was a great quarterback class, and we're
Sure.
kind of getting off on a tangent here, but this year it's not so much. So there's only a couple of quarterbacks that really stand out as top of the first round kind of guys, and that might even be pushing it a little bit. However, like you said, they were controlling the narrative until they won the football game. But getting back to Mayo, at halftime, when they spoke to him at half, he was really kind of he was almost like Bill at halftime.
He to me, his halftime interview, I literally said out loud, it felt like a dead man walking kind of tone. Like
Yeah,
he knew.
I think he knew that it was coming.
Mm-hmm.
And he might have known. I mean, Adam Schefter came out this morning and and had that tweet. But the culture is what killed Jerod Mayo. I mean, the record, no, because most of the national experts that grade the NFL said the Patriots were looking like a 4-win team, which it turns out that they were. And nobody
Vegas had them at 4.5. I would have taken the over. I thought they had 5 or 6, maybe even 7.
Right, but it wasn't the record; it was the culture, and they didn't progress, and it seemed to be getting worse as the season went on, and I think that's what sunk the ship, and a lot of it, and I like Jerod Mayo. I do. I mean, he was a great player for the Patriots, and I think he's going to be a great coach someday. I think he wasn't ready, especially given how the team was constructed. And as you and I talked offline, you said, I think he had kind of a raw deal, and we'll get into 100%. That.
Yep.
But, looking at it, I mean, for much of the year, he was his own worst enemy.
Mm-hmm.
He kept having to walk back statements. And then, this week, I mean, Jelani Tavai, what he said was absolutely brutal.
You know what? You know what the thing? I know people. I want to get to so many different things, but we're going to keep this more towards the coaching staff because, Jelani Tavai, we could definitely spend some time on that.
It all goes into that culture thing.
Exactly. And honestly, from the time Mayo was announced as head coach when they had the press conference, and then from the moment he had that quote that said burn some cash, he walked that back like 24 hours later, and it just felt like it was a constant backpedal. And then it was like almost like you're walking in quicksand or like stuck in the mud a little bit, like you're just spinning wheels. And yeah, I mean, I guess, okay, I think if you had said, or let's say some random person came to the show and talked to you and I before the year and said, hey, the Patriots are going to go 4-13. I'd say, okay, well, how does it look? Like, are we feeling good about Drake May? Like, how are we doing? But like, I think some of the most alarming things was, there were 3 things for me, Steve. The first thing was how big of a drop off the defense had from last year to this year, with relatively similar personnel. I mean, statistically, they were a bottom 5 defense, and they're last in a lot of categories, this year, which is concerning. The second thing was the walking back comments. And the third thing to me, which I know is a small detail, and maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I did felt like Mayo, I felt like he wasn't really doing a lot on the sidelines. It looked like he was kind of thinking and processing, but we didn't really see him talk to a lot of players. Looked like he was going through film with something. Bill's always taking notes, doing these things. And again, I don't want to just compare him to Bill, but like, even if you're going to be like a player's coach like Tomlin, like at least seemed like he's a little bit more active. I saw Jerod, dapping his guys up coming off the field and saying a couple things, but he always looked very stoic. I just wonder if it was too big of a moment for him, Steve. And I do think he did get a raw deal a little bit. And I know people don't want to hear this because there's a lot of people who wanted to fire, Mayo. And look, it's no coincidence that all these different papers, websites, radio stations in the Boston and, the greater New England area did these polls like, should Mayo, come back for year two? Almost every poll I saw was 85% or higher, usually over 90%. Like the people were ready to just they're like, no, this was a mea culpa breakfast ball, like you're off the tee, like the tee box, and shake one of the woods like I would. But it's like I just think I think the Crafts were kind of reading the room and were like, hey, we might have messed up here.
Well, and the Crafts, I mean, the fans were starting to rebel, and then they turned their ire from the coaching staff and the players to the front office and then to the ownership. And when you see so many social media posts about the Crafts, very much in the negative light, then I think they were forced to come to a kind of a come to Jesus moment, right? Where it's like, okay, did we totally screw this up? And maybe not. Maybe they think they did nothing wrong, and they just felt like the moment was too big for Mayo. But I mean, I don't know. I wasn't in the room, but maybe it was too much for him. I think he proved that. And it's tough. It's tough to be completely negative about this guy because, again, look at the team he was saddled with, and you have first-year head coach, first-year GM, right? And then all your coordinators are all first-year guys. There's no experience there to fall back on. And
100%. And you know what, to me,
and a bad roster.
I want to stay on Mayo, but I just want to make this one comment about Elliott Wolf. And look, I don't like clamoring for people to lose their jobs, okay? But to me, if you're going to make this drastic of a move and move on from Bill Belichick and then have his, kind of his heir apparent kind of set in stone beforehand and then fire him after 1 year, to me, it's like you got to just clean house altogether, like literally a full sweep. I would do all new front office, all new coaching staff, and just start fresh because I feel like even if it was Mike Vrabel or Ben Johnson or we'll get to the candidates at the end of the show. And we will also want to mention Joe Milton too, but we'll get to those things at the end of the show. But to me, it's like I just don't see how you keep Elliott Wolf here and then go ahead and fire Jerod or vice versa. I feel like if you're going to bring in a new coach, bring in a whole new front office coaching, system. And I don't care if it has relations to the Patriots dynasty years or not. I just want to, start fresh and start from the foundation.
And again, I mean, if they hire a guy like Mike Vrabel, for instance, maybe he doesn't want to work with Wolf, okay? And he has his own idea of bringing in a GM, or he'd have more control over certain aspects of, being a GM. So you'd have to look at that. Although that was one of the reasons why they claimed they fired Belichick, right? Because he had too much control. But if I'm the next coach coming in, and again, it will depend on the person. Right now, all signs point to Vrabel. I would keep right off the bat 2 guys from this coaching staff. I would keep Jeremy Springer as the special teams guy, and I would keep AVP not so much as an offensive coordinator, but maybe as a quarterback coach, because you look at the development Drake May had through the season, and there were so many questions about him when he came out in the draft, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of, national NFL guys said he might not even be ready to play at all this year. And, they were obviously wrong on that. And then today I looked at Joe Milton, who, again, was a project coming out, right? And again, it's only 1 game, but the knocks on Joe Milton, his footwork was bad. His accuracy was terrible, especially in the short game. and he didn't see the field well. Well, I thought he did all three of those things extremely well today. And, and you have to give AVP credit for that. So maybe keeping him as like a quarterback's coach might not be a bad idea.
Well, the problem is, Steve, is that they reportedly fired him already.
I know.
So I mean, to me, I am really upset about the Alex Van Pelt thing. I think he had the hardest job. If you look at Elliott Wolf, Matt Groh, some kind of combination there. Obviously, Elliott's point man on that. I think Groh's, kind of like second in command there. You have Mayo, AVP, and then you have Covington and Springer. Like, to me, AVP, I thought, was by far and away the best coach this year. I just think with his I know the offense struggled, and I do think a lot of that was to do with personnel. And I'm not saying he was perfect, but I do think the quarterback development aspect of it is huge. If they could retain him, whoever the next coach is, if they could retain him with something to do with the quarterbacks, I would be doing cartwheels down the street, because I think whatever he was doing clearly was working. And look, just to be fair, like Springer, we weren't really sure about. To your point, I thought he did a good job overall. I would say that it was a little rocky to start, but I thought overall, like, he did a pretty good job. Covington, we both loved. We loved the fact that he was going to be DC. We talked about how he's the defensive line coach the last couple of years, and the defensive line was for last season was the best coached position group on the entire team. And then between Covington and Mayo and whoever else you want to blame it on, everything just fell apart. Just totally.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so to me, it's like, I don't know what the direction is. As far as Mayo goes, Steve, like, look, we've talked about this a couple different times, but do you think it was you feel okay about them moving on from Jerod, correct?
Yeah, I do. And I hate saying that because I like Mayo.
I do too.
It comes down to, look, they weren't improving. In fact, I thought, they were getting worse.
Yeah.
And the culture wasn't there. I mean, he kept throwing his own players under the bus and throwing his coach under the bus. I mean, I know he was under a lot of pressure, but hey, those are things you just don't do. And, constantly having to walk back comments, not only by him, but by his players. I mean, those are things we never had to deal with before. And usually when a player started mouthing off that got the ire of Bill, that player usually was quickly gone.
Oh, yeah.
Todd thinks they should look at Shanahan. I don't know.
I mean, I think there's a lot of different directions you can go. So, look, I guess if we look at who are the potential replacements, and look, the Vrabel aspect is looming large in this, and there's a lot of different layers, like I said, to this. But to me, my biggest concern about Mike Vrabel, which seems to be, I would say, the leader in the clubhouse at this point, it seems like that's the direction they wanted to go, but didn't think he was going to be available last year. So they stuck with Jerod, and then Vrabel was available, and things went bad, and fans were booing, and they wanted to go ahead and kind of lighten things up a little bit and make a shift. So they want to go to Vrabel. I get that. I am absolutely a little worried about who would be coaching the offense, though, because to me, Mike Vrabel to me would be a great. I think he could be a very good head coach. I really do. And I think he'd be great for structure. He's a little bit more experienced. I think he is what, Jerod Mayo could eventually get to after a little bit more seasoning, just with a little bit more, experience. But who's going to be his offensive coordinator? I know that Vrabel knows how to coach football. I know that he knows defense, but his offenses pretty much ran through, Derrick Henry. And aside from that, they were having a lot of issues. Some people have thrown out Josh McDaniel returning with Vrabel. And all of a sudden you have Josh, who probably isn't getting another head coaching gig and has done well with, offenses in the past, but can't be a head coach. And you have kind of like, the main structure. And part of me likes that. The other part of me hates it. The other part of me is like, you want something fresh. On the flip side, Steve, you mentioned Ben Johnson. Well, Ben Johnson's going to be one of the hottest coaching candidates in the entire league. Last year at this time, the Patriots were one of the least attractive landing spots for new head coaches. Now you have the most money in the league to spend from a cap perspective. You have a top 4 draft pick, so you're 4th overall, all your assets there. You have a young quarterback, a really good young cornerback. So 2 of your probably 4 or 5 premium positions are, already locked in. Well, now you need to go ahead and try to find a balance and a new foundation. What would your move be and why?
Well, I think Ben Johnson is extremely intriguing because you look at what he's done with that Detroit offense, and they are just, they are electric. They have really good players on Detroit. We're not, saying the Patriots are going to be that overnight. You look at they're absolutely stacked offensively. However, you look at what he could do with Drake May, and if they surround him with some better pieces, and that that has to happen this year. You don't want to carry over $80 million in cap next year.
Right, but chew on this bone for a second. So the same thing that I just said about Vrabel offensively, you could make the same case for, and this is what I was talking about that we'd circle back to, you could make the same case for Ben Johnson defensively. He's never been a head coach too, also, which is a concern. We know his offensive schemes are. We also know that ideally an offensive coordinator that became a head coach would be great for Drake May because they could grow together. The system would stay the same. And maybe Ben Johnson would be calling plays even as the head coach. But who does he know that would be defensive, coordinator? And are you concerned about that? And the first-time head coach aspect, I do think the same conversation that you could have for Vrabel on certain things, I think you could make a case against Ben Johnson for kind of polar opposite things on different sides of the ball for the same reasons.
Well, and again, I'm looking at Ben Johnson, and he's basically going to get his pick of really where he wants to go for teams that are, looking for a new head coach. I don't think the Patriots, and I could be wrong because I don't know him, but I think the Patriots might be one of his last choices of where to go, simply because now you mentioned all the pros about coming here, the amount of cap space, top draft pick, your quarterback's already in place. But the other thing is maybe he's looking for a team that's more closer to make that next step than New England. You know what I mean? Because basically they're tearing it down to the studs here. Because they need so much help everywhere. And, that's what kind of leads me to think that he might not really be interested in coming here. And again, I could be wrong. Okay. Right.
Well, I have a question for you, but let's take a break real quick for podcast purposes. When we come back, we're going to continue the topic about Jerod Mayo being fired after one season as the Patriots head coach, and what's to come, what's next. We're going to be right back after this. All right, we're back here on Patriots 4th and 2. Steve Balscherry, Derek Havens here. As always, brought to you by PatsFans.com. Please do subscribe to us on our Patriots 4th and 2 YouTube channel. Like, share, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts. Keeps us high in the podcast ranking so other Patriots fans can find us. So, Steve, right before we took a break, you had said something that I thought was really interesting, and I think we're kind of putting the cart behind the horse here, but look, everyone's going to be talking about the same story points. Anyone who listens to this show is probably listening to other Patriot shows. And so I think a lot of people have a lot of, strong opinions about this topic, but let's play a different side of the street here. And I'm throwing this at you as I always do. There's always a curveball for me. You know that. So let's say you are Ben Johnson or Mike Vrabel or any coaching candidate interviewing for the Patriots.
I think they should interview Brian Flores too.
Okay, and you can throw his hat in the ring as well because he's done a heck of a job with the Minnesota Vikings defense. But let's say that you are one of the coaching candidates. What are your questions right now for the Patriots and for the Crafts? Because to me, I would have a lot of questions. Like usually ownership wants to hear about your plans and the direction you want to go, your philosophies, what you want to instill, what's your plan early, what do you think about the current roster, what do you think needs to be fixed the most, etc. There's a lot of different layers. If you are a candidate, you saw that someone who was a homegrown player coming through your system, play for your whole team, then work for a business that you're connected to, and as a high level executive, basically, and then kind of being an understudy to the greatest head coach of all time. Then you let go of the greatest head coach of all time, put this gentleman in place, and then fire him after 1 year. If you're a candidate, what kind of control do I have? Especially if you want to keep Elliott Wolf or Matt Groh. Do I get it? Are you going to bring in a different GM? Am I going to have final say over the roster? Yes, we have the most amount of cap space. Are you looking to invest in this offseason? What are your thoughts on, the offense versus the defense? Like there's a lot of different ways. If I'm a candidate, just as much as ownership is interviewing these candidates, they are going to be interviewing the ownership too, because for some of these guys, it's either their first shot and they don't want to screw it up, or it's their second shot and they know if they screw it up, they might not get a third. So it goes both ways, Steve.
Oh, absolutely. Excuse me. If I'm like Mike Vrabel, I mean, I know he has a close relationship with the Crabs. Mm-hmm. He always has had that. However, as they always say, the NFL's a business. So I want to know how much they're willing to invest, like you said, in the team. Are we going to spend the money to get the players we need in free agency? Because if they hit on 2 or 3 really good players in free agency and they have more than enough money to do that, boy, your draft becomes a lot easier because now you're not drafting for a position. You're going for best player available. Say they sign a left tackle, a wide receiver, and maybe another cornerback in free agency. Well, now you're coming up number 4 in the draft, and you're looking at, hey, maybe we can slide back. Maybe we still need an edge rusher, a guy like Abdul Carter. If we slide back a couple of spots, would he still be on the the board at maybe 7 or 8, right? These are questions you'd have.
Well, I think the talk, before the day would have been, hey, do you move from 1 to 3, 1 to 4, pick up some extra capital? Now you have to have the conversation of, okay, well, let's say 1 or 2 quarterbacks go, maybe Travis Hunter goes. Okay, well, who's next in line? Mm-hmm. And do you want to go for a tackle? Do you want to go for, Ted McMillan out of Arizona? Do you want to go for Abdul Carter out of Penn State, who I love? I think there's a lot of different options. And
again,
like what you alluded to,
drive that.
But there's a lot of people are going to want to get into that. And trust me, you and I are going to have hours of conversations for the next few months about that. And that's fine. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, hundreds of hours, on and off air. Okay, but right now in January, I'm not worried about that because right now the thing that is going to drive everything is who's the head coach. What's the deal with the front office? Those are the first 2 things. Right. Then we're going to get into a lot of there was a lot of contracts doled out to people who were supposed to be culture builders that some panned out, some didn't. There's going to be some guys that were outspoken that could be relieved. There's going to be openings that releases that happen. Basically, I mean, you never know what's going to happen. It's too early. The games just ended. The season just ended. And the playoffs are coming. I mean, even Tyreek Hill in Miami said that he was basically done with the Dolphins. You never know who's going to become available, and I'm not saying him specifically, but you know what I mean. Like in general,
yeah,
we can look at free agent lists and everything. Yeah, but it doesn't matter.
Todd had a comment.
See, I just don't believe that. I get where you're coming from, Todd. No, 100%. And trust me, a lot of people feel the same way. I mean, it would have been better if Joe Milton had played as well as he did, which we'll give him his flowers shortly. And they would have lost and secured that pick because it would have given him more power and more assets. But I just don't think that they're going to go be like, oh, they want us to go ahead and tank. Oh, I'm not going to do that. That might come out, and that would be damning for the Crafts if that was the case, because that would basically be what happened up in Miami, a couple of years ago. And which happens in a lot of places. But coaches are coaching for their jobs, their careers. Players are going ahead and playing, putting audition tapes out, putting tape out, whether they're, rookies or whatever. Like Joe Milton, Steve, I was going to get into it at the end, but we can do it now and then circle back to the coaches to end. He comes out as a 6th-round pick, all the tools, great size. We know about the arm, okay? And he comes out and starts slinging it. His first 10 passes were all completions. His 11th was a throwaway. I thought he read the field well. I thought he was making good reads. He was decisive. He was relatively accurate. He was spraying a little high, I thought, a couple times. But overall, he talked about his footwork earlier this week as a huge improvement as the season went along. Also, something that he pointed to AVP, which we also saw in Drake, which is one of the reasons why you and I wanted to keep AVP around in the first place. But I thought Milton today, Steve, was the only real talking point of the entire game outside of the end results, which affected, of course, the draft pick.
Yeah, and again, I mean, it was basically like we said the other day. This was more of a preseason game kind of feel to it, right? But we all knew Joe Milton's arm, but boy, I mean, he hums it. I mean, I thought the most impressive play was that one that got called back, where he was scrambling all over the place, and then on a dead run, he fired a laser beam like 35 yards to Mario Douglas in the end zone, and I was like, that was the hardest pass I think I've ever seen, because it got there in like half a second, and I was just thinking, Douglas's hands must hurt after catching that ball.
Oh, sure.
But I thought he was fantastic today. And, if there's a silver lining in the mess that they didn't, lose the game, it was getting to watch.
Well, look, I mean, people can go ahead and rank, what's more important or whatever. I do think there is value. I do think there is value to Milton going ahead and performing today, because it gives you some optimism. Even though it's against backups, it's still a glorified preseason game, but it's still a notch above, because there is still some game planning. Guys are still trying really hard. They're going for it. And if you can go ahead and harness his abilities, I think that, Jacoby Brissett, to me, I think will potentially be brought back again. But if it's a different coaching staff, I don't know. But Milton, to me, is definitely on the roster with May, because I think you've seen enough, and he has the skill and the tool set, and that's wide enough that you want to see a little bit more from him, and continue to evaluate that kind of raw talent.
Yeah, and again, I mean, this is a nice problem to have when your backup quarterback has that much potential.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we'll see next year. It'll be his second year. He'll be more probably the backup next year. I would still bring in a veteran guy,
Yep.
Maybe as your third quarterback next year.
Sure.
Your emergency guy in case somebody gets hurt. But down the road, if Milton keeps progressing the way he is, you're talking a huge bargaining chip, right?
Well, if he comes based on what he did today, I can tell you right now, if he has some really big, preseason moments next year, there'll be offers on the table the following offseason, for him, if not during the year.
Absolutely. Because, teams are always looking for a quarterback. And I mean, there was another play where, he got hit as he let it go, and the Bills linebacker kind of bounced off of him and ended on the ground. And Milton just looked down at him. He was much bigger than this guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just thinking to myself, this guy is a stud. I mean, and we knew this. I mean, we saw it in the preseason, but he
For him, it's about
even though they were backups. Okay, he wasn't playing against guys that were going to be unemployed in a week.
To me, he kind of reminds me of the quarterback version of Brandon Lloyd. And I know I'm crossing positions here, but like Brandon Lloyd, he used to make like the hard, hard catches look, easy. And, the impossible or the easy catches look impossible. It's like, I feel like that to me is kind of like Joe Milton. Like today was a good Joe Milton day, but I do think that it's all about consistency. I think this offseason could be huge.
Oh,
and again, it's great for the
It's
Patriots.
one game. It's one game.
It is one game, but it's one game when you have a guy with these kind of tools that was able to sit and kind of just kind of watch, hold a clipboard, learn everything like that. I definitely think that's one silver lining of today. If anything. So
if there was a silver lining about them screwing this up and winning the game,
Well, the only two good things I took away from the game, pretty much, was Milton's play and the fact that Drake only played one series and then they took him out because I'm like, hey, just put him in bubble wrap and go, and we'll see you in a couple months. I don't want to see you around the football.
Yeah, it was funny. Because I was clamoring to see Joe Milton play all day today. And then after, they scored a couple of touchdowns, I'm like, because I'm thinking they need to lose this game. Okay, maybe we've seen enough of Joe. Put Jacoby in. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But hey, I give him all the credit because, again, he's considered a project when he came out this year. And I thought he played really, really well. And, going into next season, he has to have a ton of confidence.
Absolutely. And again, I think it's a great storyline. Again, all the negatives and all these question marks we have, I think that's one of the small, bright spots of the day. Steve, as we finish the show, let's circle back to Mayo. We'll get to Todd's question first. Todd says, "You guys matter what? Just want to know how you feel about today overall." I'm disappointed that
very much so.
I'm disappointed for two reasons. Disappointed that they won because I thought that it'd be better overall. I don't like the narrative of people saying like the coaches or the players, like what are they doing? Like, it's not like they're going to try to lose the game, but it is disappointing because it would have given you more assets to build upon on a roster that you need a lot of things. The second thing I'm disappointed in is honestly the fact that we're talking about Jerod Mayo and replacing a coach 1 year later. To me, that's not the sign of a stable franchise. And I think I think you used the term, Steve, like a week or 2 weeks ago on one of the last one or two shows. It was a pivotal offseason going into this year, and now it's even more pivotal. I can't say the word. Apparently, it's even more pivotal. Thank you. Now we're back. Last year we're talking about the draft in October, and now this year we're starting off the year in January talking about a new head coach again. I just don't like the instability of the franchise and the decision making. Robert Kraft talks about measuring 9 times, cutting once. Well, apparently we need to do 10 times because we need to make sure that we're a little bit more accurate, because not only is it going to cost the ownership group a lot of money to pay off these contracts, but now you have to go ahead and bring someone else in. A lot more changes. A lot of people are going to lose their jobs, and new positions are going to open up. It's just going to be a whole kind of snowball effect. And now that's going to go ahead and be what Patriots Nation is focusing on the next couple of weeks as some teams are in the playoffs.
Yeah, and the fact that Elliott Wolf is still on the staff, I wouldn't read too much into that. I mean,
I wouldn't as of now.
No,
Because if Mike Vrabel is the choice, Steve, there's a chance that he says, I still want final say on the roster, and what are we going to do about Elliott Wolf? And maybe there's a change made before the draft happens. Or they could keep, him and Grow and the scouting staff on and replace them after the draft, which to some people sounds a little backwards, but usually those front office contracts end right after the draft is over, and then they're renewed or not renewed.
Right. And right now, say for instance, they're looking at a guy like Johnson, right? Well, obviously, he's still in the middle of a playoff race, and the Lions have an opportunity to go deep into the playoffs and maybe even win a Super Bowl. So if you're looking at a guy like him, there's still going to be quite a few weeks before he could be announced as your new head coach. And all the changes that would come about with him are, not going to happen for a while. Now you have
the other layer too, because Vrabel's available now.
Available now.
So if you have one week from now would be, I guess, the 12th, then you have the 19th would be the divisional round. Yeah, I mean, you could be looking for 3 more weeks at least before he could interview, probably.
Well, and if the Lions go to Super Bowl, you're looking at February. So my point is,
it's a good point.
Is that if you're looking at a guy like him, you're still right now. All your focus is going into draft prep and free agency. So you have to have somebody there still taking care of that. Now, they may end up, going in a different direction, right? With the front office guys. But I wouldn't read much into Wolf still being there right now because, that could change as soon as the hire happens.
Yeah, I just think that it's a little too early to go ahead and make, I'm not writing any, obituaries right now. It's like, okay, yeah, the Mayo thing was quick and very, it seemed like predetermined, like we kind of mentioned at the height of the show, but there's a lot of other moving parts here. So, and depending on the candidate and who they might be linked to, and we know how these back channel conversations happen, you never know who's going to be available. So,
well, if you look at
it's a reaction show more than anything. I'm sure by the time we have a show later, we'll probably have more details in the next 1 or 2 days.
If you look at Mike Vrabel's avatar on his social media account,
I
did you
pointed
see
that
it?
one out.
Huh?
Oh, I thought I mentioned that to you earlier. No, did you see what it looks like?
Yeah, damn it, Teddy Bruschi.
In Patriots uniforms, kind of dapping each other up. And by the way, someone sent that to me. Someone sent that to me in the second quarter of today's game.
Yeah.
So
I think, it's probably the worst kept secret in the league, right? But anyway, no, but the thing with Mayo, again, I mean, it started right at the beginning. I think at times he was his own worst enemy. He didn't build the culture he was looking for. I thought, as Russ told me earlier today, the lunatics were running the asylum. And, they tried so hard to be anti-Bill. I think they went too far with it. And, I like Mayo. I've said that a few times, but I just don't think he was as ready as they thought he was to take over this job.
Well, I think that's evident by their actions today. And I feel like
and I go back to a month ago, right? They were coming off the bye. They had 4 games left. And,
the loss to the Cardinals was a killer too.
The talk at that time was, hey, look, we want to finish the season strong. We want to come out off our bye and play some really good football. We're playing some really good teams. And, the fact of the matter is we want to play the spoiler and be that kind of pain in the butt team that no one wants to play down the stretch. And it just went totally south on them.
Well, they played the Colts and played probably one of their best games of the season, had the bye, and then there were a lot of talks, a lot of reports, a lot of just commentary on how important the stretch was going to be. And then the bottom fell out. And it turns out that that wasn't just smoke, that was fire. And they kind of, showed us that they kind of like peeked behind the screen a little bit today with that.
Yep. And, it just kept getting worse. And, with the players talking to the press the way they were. And I mean, these were things that we never really had to deal with before, with the Patriots teams, because Bill kept such a lid on it.
I think it was the Chargers game, Steve, that was when they decided the Crafts. I think that's when they decided they saw the stands, they heard the boos, the score, the lack of energy on the field, the lack of production, from so many different standpoints. I think that was the game where they were like, you know what? We might have to go ahead and actually do this, after all, which is
and again,
totally
they weren't getting any better. And we kept seeing the same mistakes time after time. And granted, they need two tackles. I mean, there's no other way around it. And I'll tell you what, I was adamant in my Sunday column today that Drake May shouldn't even have dressed for that game. And then on the third play, I cringed because I saw Von Miller.
Yep.
It wasn't even, like it was like he just beat his guy absolutely clean and crunched Drake May. And I'm thinking to myself, I hope he gets up from this,
Yeah, I think everyone was kind of holding their breath. I mean, to your point, Von Miller came around. Vaughn needed one more sack for like a $1.5 million incentive. So great for him.
Yeah, and again,
it's a big incentive week for a lot of guys.
When you're on the field, you play, and but that was my biggest nightmare, is May getting hurt today.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad they had at least that much sense to pull him out right then.
Totally.
And we got to see, some good stuff from Joe Milton.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, Steve, so right now we were just kind of we normally don't do a show, this hour and this date, but, with the garage filing. How can we not? I called you twice early. You didn't answer. I was about to put out like a concerned wellness check. In your area.
When you first called this morning, truth be told, I was painting my house. I was outside.
Sounds about right.
So I didn't have my phone out there, but.
Well, we'll probably still do a show later in the week, as we typically do. There's going to be a lot to talk about, wild card matchups coming up, any news on the Patriots coaching, decisions, what's the fate of, whether, it's the other coaches or the front office. There's going to be plenty to talk about. So I want to thank everyone for listening to this episode of Patriots 4th and 2. We'll be back to go ahead and circle back, and it's going to be a long story to follow, Steve. There's going to be a lot to talk about. It's never a dull off season. We've said that for a decade now. Okay,
it seems far away, but free agency isn't that far away. And now they have to go through the whole new hire. We're going to see who the coaching staff is going to be. I hope everyone keeps tuning in, because this is just the beginning of 2025 now.
I mean, I think the next 4-ish months are going to be fascinating with all there's going to be a lot of changes, I'm sure a lot of surprises, a lot of big money, a lot of, decisions in the draft room and coaching staff, front office, everything. I think it's going to be fascinating. So anyway, please do subscribe to us on our Patriots 4th and 2 YouTube channel. Also, be sure to subscribe to us on our Apple Podcast page. Like, share, leave us a review. Keeps us high in the podcast rankings so other Patriots fans can find us, whether it's Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. We appreciate everyone who tuned in live, and we will see you guys next week. Steve Belch, Jerry, Derek Havens here. Talk to you then.